Stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis,
I'm Mike Mateen.
and tonight we are talking about Survivor Island of the Idols, Episode 5. So, we're working on our schedule, figuring it out, trying to pull these episodes in when we can, but we're here tonight to talk about Episode 5, so let's do it. Did you have any high-level impressions you wanted to cover first, or?
Um, Initially, I was a little disappointed in this episode for similar reasons to that one a couple of weeks ago. But just on reflecting, it did a lot better. I just felt like they leaned so hard into like whether it would be Dean or Karishma, and they left out all of the conversation about it being Tom.
Yeah.
To try to surprise us with it. But thinking back, there was at least one or two times where in the conversation, they never had a specific conversation about Tom, but when they were kind of going through all three of them, they talked about what their reasoning would be, like for, okay, so we have Dean, Karishma, and Tom. Here's about Dean, here's about Karishma, here's about Tom. So at least we had, like, we understand why they did it, even if we didn't see it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was initially a little frustrating, and the episode, I mean, it was a little off kilter with the fact that it went back to, not, I guess, more of the traditional, where it goes reward first and then immunity. But then it didn't have an Island of the Idols trip, and what?
Oh, I was just going to, that's what I was going to say. It was no Island of the Idols trip.
Right, so you're sort of left and no real reason why. Like, it didn't say why they weren't going this time. Like, it felt like pacing-wise, they should have, based on how they were getting it before, like it should have occurred probably after the reward challenge, but it didn't. So that was a little strange. So all in all, it wasn't bad. I mean, it was entertaining. The challenges were good. It was. I understand their reasoning behind Tom. I mean, I still think. I mean, Karishma's just not that entertaining to watch. So.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I was just kind of rooting for her, whether it was good or bad for their game. I think it is. I get that they realize she's an anytime vote from either side. But, I mean, she sucks at challenges like so bad, and we just had the tribe mix up. Like, the merge is going to be at least one, if not two, more challenges. Do you really, I mean, maybe you feel like, well, okay, well, if we lose again, we have Karishma. If we lose again, we have Dean. So maybe that was part of it, which, again, left to some of the discomfort with not knowing their reasoning. Like, without seeing those specific discussions of the decision as to why Karishma should get to stick around, So.
Yeah, I felt like Karishma was a little bit better in this episode than in some, but I agree in general she's not the most compelling person out there right now, so it's not
her challenge play is so poor, it takes away from the entertainment of that part of the episode. They had to, like, help her do stuff. Like, I don't need to, like, that's just not that much fun. Like, I like to see him going all out and, like, competing at a high level, like, not, oh, well, we got to figure out how to get her through this thing, like,
Yeah. Although, like, to be fair, that was a challenge that several people had a hard time with, and they just focused a lot of time on that because it was relevant to what happened in the episode. I'm not saying she wasn't poor at challenges. I'm just saying there have certainly been other people that were poor at challenges where they didn't make that the central theme of the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, there were other people struggling, but nobody else got literally dragged by a rope and their face, like, through the sand. Like, that just wasn't fun to me.
I had a frustrating feeling about that challenge because, frankly, that is a challenge that is harder for big busted women. Because it's like, it's not comfortable to be mashing yourself on your chest, especially when that's like your only means of movement.
Yeah, fair.
So, I mean, not
I'm
that it's
not
a
saying
big
he
deal,
should have been
but
better at the challenge. I mean, I
no.
didn't like watching
No,
someone.
I agree. I guess my point there is not so much that like it was unfair or anything like that, but that I was frustrated watching that challenge because honestly, it didn't look fun to do. It didn't
No.
there wasn't really skill in it that much. It was everyone just sort of just grinding their way through. I didn't think it was a very good challenge. I didn't like it. So I
Yeah,
mean,
and where I was watching it with my wife, kind of sort of comes in and out of watching Survivor episodes, and
mm-hmm,
I said to her, I was like, there's times where you kind of watch the challenge and you say, man, that would be kind of fun to participate in, and like that would
mm-hmm,
be cool, like jumping off of things into the water,
yeah,
like those kind of things. Like this one, absolutely not. And she's like,
mm-hmm,
no way in hell, like
yeah,
why do you just people just shove their faces in the sand, like it's all hot and like
yeah.
great, like it just seems like you just don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
didn't. Yeah, I agree with
Sorry,
you.
yeah.
It's it.
The last thing on my notes of like things that I thought were kind of like a little off in this episode was also just the. I mean, I know they've done the sponsored things before. I'm fine with them doing sponsored things. Like this one was just, I don't know. It felt even weirder and cheesier,
Hmm.
pun intended, I guess. Um, you know, it just was. It felt over the top and like out of place almost. Like
Do you think it felt that way just because they haven't done one like this in a while?
I was thinking about that, but it was like, I mean, there's been the ones where like they've gone to like an outback created in the jungle, and that
Yeah.
like I don't know, that felt like this cool reward of like going to do, and it got to kind of merge the brands. Like the Sprint one, at least it was like they were doing the phone calls,
Mm-hmm.
the cars, they were giving away a car. Like there was just, I thinking back to the ones I remember, I felt usually more synergy, and not all of them. Like there are some other bizarre ones. Like I think there was one
There's been
when they
ones
like
where they watched
took
movies.
showers and they had like a soap sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really odd. Like that one, even though it made sense, like they need soap, but it was just like it felt weird. Like I think it's probably Probst's like pitch. Like I think when he doesn't believe in it as much,
Hmm.
I think he takes on like a little bit of a cheesiness that I'm feeling more so than like normal.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of honestly didn't feel that way for a couple of reasons. One was that I was actually really hungry while watching it, and those fajitas actually looked really good. So I think that was part of it. But also, I don't know, I kind of like things that are a little bit cheesy like that. I just mean it's almost camp how
Yeah.
obnoxious the advertising is. And it didn't really I mean, they haven't done one like this in a while, but it didn't feel to me out of place compared to other ones that they have done. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's fair. And you're right. Maybe that's just what I'm feeling. Why? But again, it led to this overall sort of feeling that this episode was odd.
Mhm.
And even if that's the case, even if it was perfectly well done, it is odd based on the fact that we haven't seen it in a while.
The
You know?
ones that bothered me were ones where they like got to watch Jack and Jill or whatever, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like,
you're right. Those were really stupid. You're
yeah,
right.
well,
Yeah.
it's
Well, I think you're probably right. I think I was just the fact that we haven't seen one in a while. That yeah, there have been other really stupid ones. So
yeah.
at least this one, yeah, you need to have food for the end of the challenge. It might as well be a sponsored food.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it looked
So,
really good.
and
um,
I'm not. I mean,
yeah,
I
no,
disagree,
it's
but
Applebee's, right? Like
yeah.
everyone knows Applebee's, or most people do, I think, and I would guess that most people have approximately the same opinion, which is that sure, it's pretty good, but it's pretty good in a very generic way.
I do not have that position, but
Okay, what's
I do
your
not.
Applebee's position?
I do not begrudge other people for liking it.
You think
I
it's bad?
don't think it's like bad and like just poor quality. I just don't like what they have to offer. So
Hmm.
like I don't think they like mismanage their like menu by any means. It's such just but I don't feel like, hey, yeah, it's generally good, just generic. I just like no, it's just not.
I honestly just put restaurants like that, Chili's and Applebee's and Bennigan's and all of those same sorts of places are just literally all in the same box in my head. They're interchangeable as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Um,
But I think I'm a different side of that scale on all of them than I think you kind of presented.
that's fair. I just thought those fajitas looked really good. Anyway,
Anyway,
this podcast is not sponsored by Applebee's. Let's go ahead and rewind to the beginning of the episode.
Yep.
We began with Dean, who got, and now he's Detective Dean. And he has this whole little, he's got his suspects, and he's interrogating them, and that was a whole little metaphor that lasted all of, 45 seconds, and that's fine. But it was kind of silly. It's just one of those things where, like, is there really that much mystery there? Where'd the idea come from? Like, he has to figure out whose idea it was first. Like, that's what actually matters. I thought he was really taking the wrong tack on that whole thing.
Yeah, and I think you can argue that for sure. But I would say that let's just, for the sake of assumption, assume that it is important because it was important to him to find out who did it. Who initiated it. I actually feel like he handled his way through that really well, without directly accusing anybody, or he wasn't, I know the metaphor was there, but he didn't truly interrogate anybody. He asked some very kind of there were direct questions, but not direct about what he actually wanted to find out. They were sort of around it, and he kind of triangulated it to figure out who it was. I thought he did a really good job with it.
Wow. I really have to push back on you there, or at least I disagree, because in particular with Missy, she told him pretty much straight up. It's like there wasn't one person who had a vendetta out for you. There were several names being mentioned, and yours was one of them, and that's what the consensus centered on. That is what happened. Or no, Chelsea rather, not Dean. But she didn't lie to him. She was basically telling him what happened, and then he said that she's talking, or he doesn't want to hear what she has to say. He's interrogating her, but then when she gives him the actual true answer, he doesn't want to hear it.
That's not the true answer, though. At least how I remember it. Missy's created the plan and pushed for it. So yes, while there were other names, she definitely initiated him, and her response I felt was so soft that he was able to easily identify, because you're talking around it, there was a lot of names and there was a lot of discussion. He was able to identify it was 100% her, which I felt like it 100% was her. So I think we interpreted this very differently, because I thought he did a great job, and I thought she did a poor job of answering his question and totally tipped her hand, and he had deduced it from that. Because of the way the other people answered was more direct, and hers was so sideways that he figured it out.
No, but see, her plan was not let's vote out Chelsea. Her plan, honestly, was to vote out Dean.
And
but then it became a group consensus of who can we get in the numbers to agree on. And so maybe we could still say that she initiated a move, but that it was still a group consensus that came together. She didn't, voting out Chelsea was not her initial idea. That's what it came to, because that's what she could get people to agree with.
Right, but it was still her proposal and her plan to change to Chelsea too. She ran both points of that strategy. She came up with Dean, and when she got pushed back, she changed it to Chelsea and rallied the support around that. And so she did do this, and that's why I feel like you're still conflating the argument from earlier about whether or not it's important or not whether she did it. I'm saying if we assume that is important, then he did get to the right answer, and he did it in a good way. That's what I feel like, at least,
I feel like what she told him was true, because yes, she was involved. She initiated some things, but there were several other people on board with the idea. It was just conflicting, it was about building the consensus. So yes, she was involved, but it wasn't like some conspiracy that said, hey, let's make sure that we can take out Chelsea specifically and leave Dean out of it. That's not how it started, and for him to be trying to find out where did it come from, where did it start. Where it came from was everybody arguing about who it should be and ending up settling on Chelsea.
I mean, then my notes from last time are wrong because I literally have it written down that Missy now proposes voting out Chelsea and rallies support. Like, I'm looking at my own notes, so maybe I sort of shorthanded it.
Well, but I mean, the way I recall it is that it was originally Dean because she didn't want to take out Chelsea.
Correct.
And then it was going to be, but not everybody wanted to take out Dean, and so it was a matter of who can she get everybody to agree on. And that's where it was coming down, is that it was let's see, I'm trying to pull up my own notes there. So yeah, she was pushing to have a move be made, but there was just discussion about various options, and that's who it ended up being. It wasn't her original idea. It was only ended up being Chelsea because that's who she could get people to agree on.
Right, but see, my point is, she's the one that got them to agree on Chelsea eventually. Like, it was initiated by her. Like, and that's why I felt like, again, assuming that Dean needed to know this, like, her and Aaron decided to target Dean and Chelsea as a unit. Mm-hmm. And then she picked Dean first, couldn't get the support behind it, and then continued with Aaron and her's plan and rallied the support the other way. So Aaron's answer felt more legit because, like, he actually talked about what was happening, about the power couple and that, and then she was danced around it, and so Dean realized that she was the one that had kind of pushed the throttle on this.
All right. Well, I don't agree. I feel like what she actually said about it was more or less true, and that it highlighted that he was making a mistake by trying to put the spotlight of blame on one person as though that's a productive path to take, which I don't think it is, and that I think that she was trying to explain to him that it wasn't about some personal thing that we're trying to hurt you. It was about a group of people coming together to decide what they collectively thought was best for their respective games. And even if she did initiate a move being made, he is focusing on the wrong elements. If he's trying to figure out, like, where did it come from? Well, it could have come from anybody. There were lots of people who had the same idea. Why is it not Aaron's move just as much as hers?
I mean, I'm going to pretend, I guess that was a rhetorical question because I have an answer, but I'm not going to convince you. Okay. So, like, I absolutely think 100% that it was definitely not Aaron's move and it was hers, but we're not going to convince each other, so I'll let you kind of have that last word there. Going through your explanation. And I will agree with you in closing that he was focusing on the wrong thing. Yeah. It was just my feeling that he handled it really well and did a good job. I understand why you disagree, and you've gone through that. So, I think...
Well, I think...
it doesn't ultimately matter because it was a stupid thing to try to figure out, I guess. So we probably shouldn't spend this much time, even because we're not going to convince each other. Sure. So
I just was very much with Missy after that whole argument where she's talking about, like, dude, it was almost you. Why are you so mad right now? You are not helping your own case. And I was, like, with her in that frustration.
Right. And I think your explanation there, like, just again, like, shows that we, like, we watched the same events and just perceived them differently, because I felt like that was part of why he was so mad about it, is that he knew it was, maybe he didn't know it would have been him if he could have gotten the votes, but he knew it was their unit and he was part of the target. Mm-hmm. Not just left out of the vote, but also partly targeted. And that's part of why he got, again, I don't think it was productive to go try to figure this out. I agree with you. But I felt like that's what, he did realize that it was almost him. Whether or not he knew how close, I think he did know that.
Well, so, I just think she was feeling like, I wanted it to be you to go. And I caved to some of my allies who pushed for it to be Chelsea instead. And I did that because they like you, and I feel like you are now punishing me for saving you. And so I felt like she was probably regretting voting out Chelsea, frankly. and wished that she had voted out him instead. And I frankly don't blame her based on just that. I don't. I get where he would be feeling emotionally, but again, it's like, no, people aren't good at telling when it's obvious to others that they're in a showman's power couple, or even if it's just perception is reality. But it's like, he put himself in that situation, whether he realized it or not, and then focusing on trying to cast a supervillain as responsible is not productive. Like, he just basically isolating himself by challenging everybody around him. Now is like, who was it? You? Was it you who turned on me? And making it a whole thing instead of just being able to move on. But okay, sorry, I don't mean to keep driving that in. It's fair. So in any event, we went to the reward challenge. I liked initially that it was on this cool tiny little sandbar, but as we kind of talked about already, that sand slither thing just, I don't know. I mean, we've talked before about the challenges that either look fun to do or don't look fun to do, but this one, honestly, I didn't even find it fun to watch, really. So maybe part of it was for the reason that you said, like, that it was just like there were a couple of people, including Karishma, who were having such a hard time that it just really was frustrating to watch.
Yeah. I mean, so like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Kind of covered all. Yeah, that it just, it was not, and we, yeah.
But like Janet had a hard time with that too. She slowed Lyro down a fair amount. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it wasn't quite as dramatic as having to literally like be pulled up by the partner.
Yeah, exactly. So. And
then of course, Vokai wins pretty handily. We have Tom talking about Karishma continuing to struggle. Jason talks about the idea that there's a 4-4 tie with I guess we didn't. I kind of skipped over the actual tribe mix-up.
The tribe mix-up, yeah. So they competed with different members than normal, and with Vokai winning again, they didn't have all the same people.
Yeah, so we have the new Vokai tribe is Dan, Lauren, Elizabeth, Missy, Aaron, Tommy, Elaine, and Jason, which is 4 and 4 of the other, the old tribes. And we have Elaine express happiness that it not only seems like it's a much stronger tribe in general, which is certainly true, and she's also happy that the people that she's managed to be there with from her old tribe are people that she likes. So, she's pretty pleased with how that went. Meanwhile, we have the new Lyro is Dean, Karishma, Jamal, Tom, Nora, Kelly, Jack, and Janet, which is 5-3 with, the old Vokai in the minority. And Karishma is optimistic at this point just because she knew she was in dire straits before. So it's like potential new chance. But then, of course, we have the challenge. And I liked seeing her enthusiastic at the reward just because she's more engaging when she's not, in the doldrums. But seems like it's not lasting. Let's see. Okay. So do you have anything else to say about the mix-up or the challenge?
No. I mean, I think you pretty much covered the sort of what mix-up was fairly standard. It felt. I wrote a note that at the time it felt almost staged as to who they put with who because of how there's kind of the pairs or groups that they left together. But
well, we didn't see. Sometimes
they didn't seem like a random way that it was done. They just kind of did it, and it says randomly, but whatever. Ultimately, it was fine.
Did they say it was randomly? I maybe they did, and I just missed it.
It ended up fine. Yeah. I wrote that they said it was randomly, but we didn't see it be random. So because of the way it came, so that's what I kind of was like, yeah. But ultimately, when I looked, I was like, are these fine groups? Like, these groups seem cool to have together. Like, it seems interesting enough, entertaining enough. Like, yeah. So I'm not going to dwell on it.
Yeah. So after the challenge, we have Jason talking about how on that tribe, the new Vokai with the 4 and 4, they need to bring someone over. Nobody wants to go to a 4-4 tie. Meanwhile, we have Elaine talking about how it's a honeymoon phase of everyone meeting each other, but she's worried about how some of her former, her old teammates being overly friendly to the new ones instead of staying strong. And I like Elaine a lot generally, but I worry that she's a little naive for the game.
I agree.
She's getting a lot of mileage just on being very likable, which is certainly a nice quality to have, but it doesn't necessarily prepare her to go up against some of the people who are playing a little more strategically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I 100% agree with you. It's coming up here in a minute, but I loved when her and Missy like had the little wrestling match.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
She's definitely entertaining, and she's likable and funny. Completely opposite of the concerns that we had from the pre-show. I remember we were like, both her and the lady who's the lifeguard, Janet, we were both like, they just had very stern faces in their pictures, and it was like, it said they were really fun and like lighthearted, but it's like, are you just pretending that you're really kind of sourpuss? But neither of them is like that. They are both actually how they describe themselves.
Yeah, and which is nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's really, they're fun to watch. Like, they're both entertaining. They're both really likable. So.
Yep. So, in the meantime, we have, after, poor Karishma, after doing so poorly in that immediate challenge, is just immediately deflated from, the excitement of being on the new tribe, of just saying, like, I'm just in the same spot because everyone knows how bad I am in challenges, and it seems like that's all anybody sees. But it's also worth asking, I suppose, that, like, we heard complaints last time, and I don't remember if anyone mentioned it this time, but is she doing stuff at camp in order to kind of make up for that? It seems like maybe no. So
no, I feel like someone would have discussed that in the reasonings between people, is like, well, Christmas sucks at challenges, but she's an easy vote and she's helping out a lot at camp. No, it's just, she sucks and she's an easy vote. So
yeah,
we happy to get rid of her. We're happy to keep her if there's a better threat, because we can just always get rid of her because she's going to keep sucking. Like, that's what it feels like the general consensus is, which, again, coming back to like the parts that kind of you pointed out that are like not necessarily like her, like some of it is her own just unengaging personality, and just, she's just not entertaining on TV, and she's not entertaining in the challenges. Like, it's sad to watch her like perform so poorly. But then it's also like the whole fact that like the only reason she keeps around, like, everybody thinks she sucks and like they just want to leave her around as an easy vote. Like, that's not fun either,
Yeah.
Like, her whole presence unfortunately just kind of dampers me right now. And some of that's not her fault,
Right.
Like you said. So it's a weird feeling when you're like rooting for somebody to go when they're not like actively doing something crappy that makes you not like them.
Well, yeah,
I do root for her to go. It's just from this is my entertainment, and this makes it less entertaining to me. So,
Yeah. Well, like there's
some honest with where it comes from, I guess.
Well, there's some talk, she mentioned it, earlier in the season, and there's the discussion about arranged marriages this time, where she talks about being from, kind of a different culture in terms of her upbringing, and how she really is struggling to fit in. And several times, there's been lots of players that have had that problem, and it's something that is is hard to watch because either she's just rubbing you the wrong way like she is with other people there in terms of not getting along, but you can also have that sort of like that feeling of not fitting in and you want to empathize with her, but at the same time this is a game where you kind of have to. And so it's true that some people are just not as good at fitting in, and fitting in with this group like this is not easy, and that's can be kind of upsetting to watch, but it's also like not every, everyone else on the show, we would hope that, they can be more understanding, and then that's not it, but it's also, they're all here to win $1 million. It's not really their job to try to make everybody continue to fit in. I mean, their job is to try to have everybody else get voted out before them.
Right. Well, I think to your point there about like kind of how just like awkward like that part is, like I think this sort of this next little sequence that comes after like where we are, the edit even like leans into this because you see like Dean hangs out with Kelly and like they click, and then Tom and Janet are clicking, and then like it goes to like Karishma, and like, yes, we recognize that she's in a tough spot. Like she, but she's in the same spot as Dean and Tom, technically. And we see them, again, edited in a certain, these things all happen, but they're edited in an order where it's like, oh, Dean and Kelly get along. Oh, Tom and Janet get along. Oh, Karishma is going up to literally everyone saying, I will do whatever you want. I will do whatever you want. I will do whatever you want. Like, it just was weird. Like, she just doesn't fit in. She's having trouble bonding with them. And this is like an interaction that she has that's so distinctly different from Dean and Tom's.
Yeah.
And they set it up that way to make us feel even more awkward about her,
Yeah. I mean, she is in a different spot though than Dean and Tom for other reasons though, which is that not that is like an offense, but I mean it's like
sand in a challenge.
Yeah, it's that is it if the concern is who's going to be good at challenges, she is the obvious weakness. And frankly doesn't even have Tom and Dean on her side. So it's not even like it's the three of them against the other five. Like they don't like her. They're anxious to throw her under the bus.
Yes. Okay. That is true. You're right. That is true. I guess it's sort of like I kind of got a little over with sort of the narrative. I mean, I still feel like the narrative, the way it's set up, still accomplishes the same thing.
I agree. She came on really strong. That's certainly true.
Right. She didn't even try to just do it where, like, didn't try to just build up relationships with these people and then worry about pleading her case after immunity or something, like, or even.
I mean, she did have that
before that. I mean, it was so over the top and like, well, I'm ready to jump ship. Those guys don't even like me, so like, either one of them, I'm down. Like that's just kind of what it felt like, and it was like, I don't know, like this seems kind of pushy. And they even mentioned that a little bit later, like she was like quick to turn on them, and because they were using it as part of the like, well, hey, if we basically what they settled on was they're not keeping her around because she's a vote for them. They're keeping her around because literally everyone will vote for her at some point if they need it.
Right.
So,
well, but she did actually. So it wasn't just entirely that she didn't form any connections, though. I mean, we saw her have that whole conversation about the arranged marriages, and she talked in the confessional about how she felt comfortable opening up to some of these new tribe mates in a way that she never felt comfortable in the other tribe. Now, we didn't really see much of that from the other side, like other people reacting to that, but we did see that happen.
That's true. I think that's probably just my nose again, shorthanding it through and just saying like, just really noticing the way it like patched together again, like that. I just focused, I think, a lot on that about like, man, these guys aren't even like helping her with this story. Like to show like these two laid back dudes like getting along with people and then showing her pleading to everybody. Like, God, like, of course we feel like she doesn't fit in, so yeah, you are right though. Yeah. So she did. It is, again, it comes back to the same thing that we talked about a little bit ago. It's not even all of this is her fault. Like she's in this position. She has a connecting moment, but yet even from the show editor part, like they set us up to make her seem like she's just so desperate and can't connect with anyone. Like it's just.
Well, so the other thing though,
I'll go back to like my selfish argument of like it's not entertaining. Like
yeah,
it's nothing against her. Like I don't dislike her as a person. Like I wish her well. I just don't feel like having her on the show is as entertaining. Like I would rather see Tom do more stuff
hmm
in future episodes than I would her. And it's totally not her fault with all of this. You
right.
know.
Um,
So
one additional nuance though that I think was part of the reasoning that they ultimately obviously decided to keep Karishma was not just that they could get rid of her whenever, although that's certainly true and part of the rationale, but I think part of the rationale also was she actually needs us, whereas Tom and Dean could easily just go back to their other allies if there was to be a merge or another mix up.
yeah, and yeah, and ultimately, like Dean, they feel like is the bigger threat, like long term, because he does form relationships really well. He's super likable. He's good at challenges. And Tom, they kind of tipped a little bit, you know, the fact that like he has this like old school mentality, like they think his loyalty is, you know, like he's going to preserve that loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're not going to be able to win it over, you know. So yeah, there were a number of things that went into this, but ultimately, like she needed them, and if they ever decided that they just needed to cut somebody else, like not hard to rally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what they were all thinking without necessarily saying, if they're being truly strategic, I would say, is that she's somebody that if she makes it to the merge, and we want to mix something up with somebody else from a different tribe, like here's a person that we can kind of rally behind,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and get like a group of people to work with us or whatever. You know, like I think they're thinking if they're thinking strategically, that makes sense. Like that's going to be way harder to do with Dean unless, you know, they because they don't have any information that would show that other people might also consider Dean a threat and be willing to work with them on him. Like that's more of a dice throw, where they know for sure that they could get people to work with them on Karishma if they needed.
Well, I
So
think
it
it's
all
almost
goes both ways. Like if they want to keep her, she needs them. If they don't, they can use her as something to rally other people around that's a little less controversial.
but when we talk about the merge though, the problem there is not can they get people to agree on Karishma, because once you get to the merge, you don't want to vote out Karishma because she's not a threat. Why would you vote out Karishma after the merge? You want to take out a threat after that, right? So if you're gonna want to get out Dean because you think he's a threat, get him out sooner is the logic.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, Tom, of course, I think was, not as big a threat as Dean, but I'm not, well, so I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. So let's jump back to where we were. So we did have a little bit of Dean connecting with Kelly because I guess they have a mutual friend. We have Tom connecting with Janet, as you said. Um, and Kelly talks to the camera a little bit about the idea that she feels like she could work with Dean, but then again, Karishma is like eager to sincerely and completely flip as opposed to someone I could just work with. And she's also a little bit actually suspicious of that feeling of connectedness with Dean. Like, he's very easy to talk to and easy to get along with, to a point where it's a little bit like, am I just falling for something here? Um, which I thought it was interesting because on the one hand, I think it was probably astute, but oddly enough, I don't actually think Dean was doing anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a smart thing to be suspicious about, but Dean doesn't really have a very sophisticated game. He really mostly is just kind of being likable and trying to be good at challenges, right? I mean, that is kind of really all he's trying to do. He
Yeah.
doesn't seem like he's actually planning anything more sophisticated than that. So that concern about like, oh, is he really just leading me on, like, to use me or something? Except that like he actually kind of probably isn't, or at least not deliberately.
No, I don't think he's doing it deliberately.
Yeah. Let's see. So we talked about Karishma's discussion about the arranged marriages a little bit, and then we mentioned the fun wrestling between Missy and Elaine. That was fun. Erin observing how good she is at making people like her as a possible concern. Erin connects with Tommy. Aaron was humanized a fair amount in this episode, I thought.
Yes.
Um, so that was interesting to see, talking about having the pictures of his kids on his socks and the joke about like his kids thought those socks were really embarrassing, but he was wearing them anyway. Um, and then Tommy said like, "Oh, he's going to be the most famous kid in first grade" or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree that it humanized him. Um, I liked Tommy in this one. I've always kind of liked him, but I grew to like him much more
mm-hmm.
in this one. I just thought he was. I don't know. And I know he was the one that kind of talked about it, but I never really thought of him as like a huge like challenge physical threat.
Mm.
But once he mentioned it, I was like, actually, yeah. Like, I guess because you just think he's the fourth grade teacher and he's kind of this friendly dude. Like,
He's kind of
he's a little disarming. Yeah.
well, I was going to say he's got a lanky build that you don't necessarily associate with athleticism, but
Right.
he looks a little skinny maybe, but he's very coordinated. He's been doing pretty well.
Yeah.
As is directly contrasted with Dean, where a couple of people kind of point out that Dean looks a little bit more the part of someone you would expect to be really good at challenges, but hasn't necessarily been delivering at the expected level.
Yeah. Well, and Dean even talked about he was frustrated because he's, I guess, a collegiate basketball player and got beat by Tommy, I think, basically. Yeah. I know it wasn't 1v1, but right. It was essentially like he had the opportunity to win, and Tommy is the one who ended up winning.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. We get to the immunity challenge. Vokai is pretty dominant for the whole challenge up to the basketball thing, where it ends up tied 2-2, but Vokai wins. Just you could probably write some of that up to just them having been there longer, so it wasn't quite so fresh. Like, so even though there was a lot of the lead was eaten up by Lyro kind of pulling in closer, but Vokai had just had too much of a lead.
Yep.
And so let's see. After the challenge, we learn no Island of the Idols. I assume because the mix-up, and so maybe it'll be back next week. We'll see. I think it would be weird to have it be missing 2 weeks in a row, but you never know. Yeah. Who knows what they're doing this season? It's all kind of loose. But so Jack talks for the first time all season, as far as I can remember. No, that's not entirely true, but he hasn't had much to say. But he talks to about oh well, I like Tom, Karishma, and Dean, but Karishma just isn't performing in the challenges. He's given the pretty standard she's the obvious target speech. I didn't, we have Dean and Tom talking, and I didn't especially, even though I certainly know what he means and I don't think it was deliberate, I didn't really like that Dean's figure of speech for getting rid of Karishma was cut the fat. I wish he had come up with a different phrase than that.
Yeah, I agree. I also agree with you that I don't think that was meant to be anything other than that expression.
Yeah. But it was not a very considered way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, people do that, though. It was funny.
I know. Yeah.
We were having a conversation at work today. We had volunteered at like the Autism Academy to do something for like one of their days, like where they, I don't know, and they wrote us like this really cool like poster thing with like all the kids like wrote like all these funny things, and I was like, and then it came in and I was like, oh, that thing's really great. You guys did a great job volunteering, and all those kids
Oh, you broke up on me.
for you, and what works for me. He's like, yeah. He's like, they're great, huh?
You broke up on
Yeah.
me. I got you did a great job volunteering.
Yeah. So I said, oh, you guys did a great job volunteering. Like they wrote you this huge poster, and one guy's like, yeah, man, those kids are great. Like they're crazy over there, and it's like, maybe not.
It's
I know what you mean, like crazy in an excited way,
right.
but like maybe not that one.
Well, not to make it a whole big subject, but so often the things that some people call politically correct really just amounts to consider your words so that you don't inadvertently hurt someone's feelings. Right? It's like sometimes you might slip up by accident, but you just, if your intent is to be paying attention and perceptive, and if you recognize, oh, maybe that was not the best way to phrase it, I'll try to do better next time. That's what we're looking for, right?
Yeah, and that's how he took it. He was like, he's like, yeah, man, I probably should have used a different term. He's like, but part of the reason he even said it is because like he's not attributing that like to them. Like, so he doesn't realize that there's a history of that, because he's not thinking about that. But that's where the slip up comes. And it's like, to your point, you just kind of correct it and say, maybe not that. Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll be more cautious next time. Yeah.
So in any event, we have Jamal agreeing with Dean and Tom that just from a standpoint of winning challenges, he agrees that she would be the one to go. Although, to some extent, we know that he would say that regardless of how he felt about it, because, of course, right? Like that's, that's what you do when you're playing Survivor, is that you try to, tell the alternate target that they're safe, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. We have, this is where we have Karishma going around saying that she'll just do whatever they want, trying to play up the social game, but coming on pretty strong. Then here's where we have Janet, who did connect with Tom, saying she appreciates that he's this straight shooter, but also feels like if we merged, he would go back to the old Lyro people. And so this was the only real bit we had where anyone really talked about voting out Tom. But I think that's the one little piece that in hindsight might have been the rationale. Right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying is like they tipped it a little bit, and his sort of old school straight shooter is what made them also think he might be fiercely loyal.
Right.
So. Yeah.
This is where we had Kelly talking about being a little bit wary of Dean, that he's maybe not the right person to bring into the merge. And then we have Nora talking about how she lost her vote. And I was curious, like, does everybody know she lost her vote? It seems like I was going to say it seems like they did, because otherwise, like, she's in the position potentially of ruining a plan by not letting them know.
See, I felt like that just the way Nora is, she's not considering that.
I feel like perhaps off camera, or, at least we didn't get to see it, but I feel like her lie was so bad that the fact that they made her sit out, which revealed the lie last time, I feel like it must just be all on the table after that. Not necessarily the truth about what happened, happens at Island of the Idols, but that, she would have, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it would have come up potentially. I don't know, maybe not.
Well, I can totally see what the situation you described happening. I can equally see that Nora is so caught up in her own sort of self-thought that she's not even considering the fact that like she could mess up a plan by not having a vote, and she's just going to ride through it and hope that it doesn't mess things up.
I guess so. I just feel like it would have, if they didn't know, I feel like it seems they would have been able to get more mileage out of her having to negotiate the discussions of voting, knowing that she wouldn't actually be able to follow through. And now maybe they just decided not to because it wasn't that interesting, but just the fact that they didn't spend more time on it is why I was kind of having the feeling that they maybe did now.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying I can see either of those scenarios being equally true.
Yeah.
She has not given us anything to think that she wouldn't just roll with this and hope they don't find out.
So in any event, Nora is extremely lucky to have new targets taking the attention away from her. So, you know, she really lucked out as far as the the whole way that the split went. It was about as good as it could possibly be for her, because she ended up on the majority of numbers with more obvious targets available. So, yeah.
There you go.
She could have easily been in Karishma's boat. In any event, we get to Tribal Council, and we have Tom talking about, okay, well, the Vokai 5 have been very welcoming, but they're staying strong. Karishma is kind of all over the place, but she's talking about is, you know, self-preservation. You know, we have Janet talking about needing to win challenges, and Karishma looks worried. But, you know, I can understand that, too, except that the more they talk about in the Tribal Council, the more that's probably not actually what's happening, right? You know, because that's just kind of the pattern, is that people kind of they're trying to sell that it's the obvious target instead of whoever they're actually planning to blindside, right?
Right.
But if you're actually planning to vote for the obvious target, you know, maybe you don't have to worry about it, but you would generally want to try to make them feel like they're safe, right? But in any event, Nora continues to be in a slightly different plane of reality than everyone else. She just spontaneously starts laughing, kind of rattles off the different choices, and then there's a lot of teasing that she doesn't actually use anybody's names, but her descriptions are so obvious that, like, there's not a single person present who doesn't know exactly who she's talking about.
Yeah.
You know, there's one guy who's older, and there's one, you know, woman who's not as good as in challenges. And it's like, everyone's like, why? You might as well just say their names at that point.
I thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I agree. Well, and I take it back too that it was interesting that the way I just described it, I had her version of what she would say about Karishma. But what actually happened is that she described Dean and Tom in that way, so that it was obvious who she was talking about. But she actually didn't mention Karishma.
Yeah.
Which makes it an interesting question of maybe what was really going on behind the scenes is that everyone else, the 5, had basically said, Karishma will vote with us, so let's get out one of the other 2. Who should it be? Should it be Tom or Dean? And so she's kind of telegraphing that that's what the discussion had been, is it's between Dean and Tom, and so that's what she's thinking about. And that's why she doesn't mention Karishma, because that she wasn't one of the options that was being considered as far as she was concerned.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. Although, you know, the other way that you could theoretically take it in advance is Karishma saying, like, it's so obvious that I'm the one that's going to go that they don't even have to consider me. Like, they're already thinking about the next one. But, you know, turns out that's not what was happening. Mm-hmm. I thought there was some interesting stuff about Tom talking about saying, you know, you have to have confidence in who you are. But I wondered if part of that whole attitude was actually what got him voted out. Because it's one thing to say, just know who you are and be that person, but maybe what that comes across to other people as is someone who's inflexible and isn't going to be willing to bend to work with you.
Yeah, I 100% agree that was part of it. I think that's like when I opened this and I said, you know, it gave some like nods to let you see how this could have happened. And that's why, even though it ultimately felt like they leaned so hard on this, like, is it Dean? Is it also, there's kind of this Tom thing. They left us the breadcrumbs there. And one of them was this whole personality, like the whole thing that Janet was talking about, like this old school personality, like this fierce loyalty. So this is an extension of that straight shooter conversation to just show us that why they felt unease with him from the perspective of, is this somebody who we can have with us long term? Like, he clearly is showing that he's not. And I think that's why why they gave us this, is this was part of that decision making. Like, this is the overall attitude that he presents, which is not in sync with what they're trying to do long term, and that makes him more of a concern than a Dean.
So, meanwhile, we
and to
had,
your point, it sounded like it actually came down to a more Tom versus Dean, as opposed to Dean versus Karishma. You know?
Well, I think that makes sense, because on the one hand, either Dean or Tom as one option, or Karishma is a stark choice, right? You're either getting rid of the person who is bad in challenges, or you're taking out one of these other two people who you think are perhaps more of a threat, right?
Right, and so they're weighing their threateningness against each other, as opposed to, do we just want to get rid of somebody who sucks at challenges?
Yeah. Right, and so it sounds like they made that first decision earlier, and so the real ongoing discussion was more about Dean versus Tom. It's interesting, though, because, you know, we do have Dean talk about marketing himself, but then Janet points out that you never marketed yourself to me, never came over and talked to me. And this is where, you know, like, some of this might just be that, you know, he's kind of, you know, he's a young guy, but, you know, this, you know, not to bring up our whole discussion from the beginning of the episode too much, but that plus this made me kind of just feel like he doesn't really listen to, I don't want to necessarily just make it a doesn't listen to women thing necessarily, but it's more a matter of who he respects already or doesn't.
Yeah, and I don't want to launch into like another argument about it, but I think what this is showing is that we just both perceive Dean very differently. Because what I saw in this was her rightfully calling him out, and he started to defend himself a little bit, and he just had this self-realization, I felt like, where he was like, you know what, you're right. And he did say that to her. And I thought the fact that he realized he had this persona he had created, that, and once it was sort of broken down, he was able to admit to it. I liked that a little bit. And so, but again, I see your perspective on this one for sure. I just saw it differently, you know, and well, I'm glad he gets to stick around, because I think it will be, I think that is an interesting storyline to watch unfold, is like, you know, where, like, is he really just self-absorbed, or is he sort of naive, and as he comes to these realizations, he's able to improve himself? Like, it could be either one. And I think, you know, again, based the first conversation, I think, was a little bit about us perceiving that different, and this was too. So we'll see, and it may turn out to be 100% that you're right, and he doesn't listen to people, or doesn't listen to women, or doesn't do this, or it's just, and again, it's just self-absorbed, and I'm incorrect, and it's only he only acknowledges it when he's like straight up called on it. Or is it naivety? And for being kind of younger and always being in a certain position. I mean, again, he was a college basketball player. He's a marketing guy. Like, he sort of lived in a bubble world, perhaps. You know, again, I don't know his whole life, but you could see that could be a storyline behind him.
Sure.
So,
well, and then it's also, like Kelly says, which I also really liked, about how there can be multiple truths, because, you know, our discussion tonight is a perfect illustration of that, in the sense that you can have two people have a conversation and then both come away with very different views about what just happened, right?
Right.
And so when one person describes their position and the other person that describes their position and they seem contradictory, it doesn't mean that one of them is lying. It doesn't
Right.
even necessarily mean that one of them is wrong. It just gets into where you sometimes have to be able to distinguish subjective impressions from facts. And I think that was maybe why, like, because it came back up, even though it wasn't Dean in this case, it was Tom and Karishma discussing it. But the discussion of, like, does Karishma know who initiated the Chelsea blindside? And I kept just feeling like it doesn't actually matter because it could have been anyone. And even if hypothetically we say, in this case, it was Missy, even if we want to say that is what happened, and it's, I certainly don't really dispute that she's central in that whole thing, but even if she did it, like, even if it was 100% her, taking out Missy doesn't mean you're safe now, right?
Well, and again, this is another thing where I thought they were trying to get at something different there.
Okay.
I thought they were trying to identify, was Karishma on the in and part of an inner circle that had made a decision against Dean? And so
Okay.
was she potentially someone who would go back to this group, or was she on the outside of that decision, which is what they believe, and remaining that she's an outsider and needs them?
Okay.
That's how I took it, because their whole argument here is she needs us. So
Well,
this was kind of the
yeah.
test of that argument is, does she really need us, or is she actually part of something over there that orchestrate? Like, did they tell her, basically, is what I saw.
I think you're onto something, and that retroactively changes to me my impression of how this vote was going to go down, because I think no one was surprised now. Because honestly, we know that it's not true that Karishma was actually in on that whole plan. She was always just going to be, we can use her vote, she'll vote for whoever we say, because otherwise it'll be her, right? Like, we know that's the truth, that they did keep her out of that discussion until the last moment. And so we know that the argument of Tom and Dean, like, from their perspective, maybe, you know, they wouldn't know that for sure, but that sounds to me like they're changing up the argument to be something other than she's bad at challenges, because they know that everyone has already decided that's not what they're voting based on. So if it was more obvious to everybody that it was going to be Tom or Dean, but they were just kind of still hoping they could convince people that it should be Karishma, and they were already sensing that they weren't getting any traction with the challenges angle, that they're trying to say, oh, she's actually also unloyal, or rather too loyal, or however you put it, you know, couldn't be trusted because she'd go back to the other Lyro, even though that is absolutely more true of Tom and Dean than of Karishma.
Right.
Yeah. But I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I did really like Kelly's whole statement about how there can be multiple truths, and that the whole game is about making these little leaps of faith. Because on the one hand, I think it was very true and astute, but it's also the perfect sort of generic thing that you can say in a tribal council, where you're giving out little profound sounding platitudes that don't actually contain any real information. So it's like perfect tribal council speak.
Yep.
So I thought that was really good.
I just got notified that I have to go to dinner.
Oh, okay. Well, we're just about done here. So
we'll tie it up.
Yeah. So obviously, Tom, Karishma got 2 votes from Tom and Dean, and it seems like it was unanimous for Tom otherwise. And so, we have Rob from the little secret bunker saying, well, they won't win any challenges now. Maybe, you never know. These things don't always work out like you think. It's not like Tom was the one that was helping everybody with the challenge necessarily. I mean, he was doing okay, but it's not like he was their power player or something. In any event, next time, the whole preview is like about focusing on there's a potential tie on the other side. Does that mean that it's like a spoiler of who actually wins the challenge? Maybe. We'll see, I guess. But so And then the last little bit is Tom's proud of himself, but like, I mean, I guess I don't really have reason to doubt him, but it seems incredible that he's the first Canadian to play. That just seems bizarre. Like, in all of this time, they haven't had a single Canadian on. That seems really unlikely to me. I don't, I get, I don't feel like they would say
I
it
have
if it
no way to
wasn't
fact
true,
check
but
that.
yeah, anyway. Maybe it's true, but if so, then that's
No
just
way to
really
fact.
weird.
I don't have. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to fact check that. So
Yeah. So in any event, that's where we'll leave it for tonight. We may have to miss this coming. No, wait, no, Tuesday. Tuesday is our plan.
Tuesday.
Not tomorrow, but next Tuesday is when we'll be discussing the next episode. In the meantime, extra-life.org, and you can check out the podcast notes or the YouTube notes for this episode to find my campaign, where this weekend I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons to raise money for children's hospitals. It's a great cause, and then you can tune in to watch the Twitch stream of that game over the weekend, 10 to 10, Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be a great time, so check it out.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Sorry, I got to go.
That's fine.